You're listening to The Physician's Mind, raw stories and real talks from people striving for greatness in medicine and in life. This is where ambition meets action and where the relentless come to level up. I'm your host, Curtis Wilkerson. Thank you so much for listening. Let's get right into it. In this episode of The Physician's Mind, I sit down with Dr. Franky Davis, orthopedic surgeon, educator, and founder of Real Estate Investor MD, who transformed $190,000 of student loan debt into a real estate portfolio worth over $6 million. Dr. Davis breaks down the mindset, strategy, and hustle that it took to build wealth without sacrificing his medical career or his family life. For med students and doctors who are hungry for freedom, balance, and purpose, this is a perfect episode for you to listen to. We talk investing, mental health, physical fitness, and the power of betting on yourself early. There's a listener bonus. You can get an exclusive discount on Dr. Davis's real estate course at realestateinvestormd.com. Just punch in code, all caps, Physician's Mind. And finally, download 10 Rules for Mental Toughness and Peak Performance for free at www.thephysiciansmind.com. If you want to think bigger and build a life that matches your ambition, this conversation is a must. If you enjoyed this episode, please share on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Let's grow the Physician's Mind community. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy the episode. Welcome back to the Physician's Mind podcast. I am your host, Curtis Wilkerson, and today I'm honored to be speaking with Dr. Franky Davis. Dr. Davis, thank you so much for joining me, sir. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get right into our first question, sir. What is it that pulled you towards medicine, particularly orthopedic surgery? And was it a straight path for you, or did your vision evolve along the way?
So it was a fairly straight path. I got introduced to healthcare fairly early in my life. My dad's a dentist, and I had exposure to someone who had their occupation with the opportunity to take care of people, and I found that appealing. It was a very positive quality of life. For me growing up, my dad grew up sort of blue collar and had the opportunity to pursue professional school and improve our life situation, which was fantastic. But I knew early that I did not really enjoy dentistry. I didn't like mouths and teeth and the scenario associated with practicing dentistry. So I felt like maybe I wanted to explore another option. And then the story, sort of stereotypical orthopedics story. I was an athlete growing up and had the opportunity to play sports and enjoy that. I got hurt later in my high school career and was exposed to orthopedics, and that was kind of my first touch point. After that, my school, which I was very thankful for at the time, had something called senior projects, which allowed us to target a profession in our town, and then we could spend 6 weeks with them as a one-on-one sort of shadowing opportunity. And I was able to work with the orthopedics hand surgeon, and that was my first sort of deep dive exposure as a senior in high school, and it just lit the fire in me to want to pursue orthopedics. I loved the operating room. I loved the mechanics associated with orthopedics. I loved operating in general, but also really enjoyed the clinic. I enjoyed the subject matter and the topic. And so that was sort of what got me started on the orthopedics track. And then as we moved forward with undergraduate school, medical school, that was just something that I always pursued. And I had kind of some pivots and some backup plans if it didn't work out, but I was lucky enough to be able to successfully pursue orthopedics.
Absolutely. So your dad was a dentist. You were interested in that sort of realm of helping people out. You realized you didn't really like dentistry, had an injury, were exposed to the orthopedic field as a high schooler, realized, yes, this is what I want to do. And then the rest was history.
The rest was history. Then it was just grind till you make it.
That's right. That's right. So now you're in med school. Fast forward, you've got a growing family and you've got $190,000 in debt, correct?
Oh, at least. I think that actually was ticked quite above that as I finished residency, but at the end of medical school, yeah.
Okay. So what was your mindset as a medical student about money and long-term success, and what did you believe was possible at that point?
So very similar situation to a lot of people. I feel like at this point now, $190,000 to even $220,000 of debt is actually pretty good considering the cost of school and the financial situation a lot of med students are coming out and going into. What I'll say is that I didn't get into medical school my first time. So when I got into medical school the second time, I reveled in that a little bit. So I definitely tried to get my sea legs and make sure that I wasn't going to waste the opportunity that I was given to pursue the career that I wanted to pursue, because the slate was wiped clean, even though I didn't get in my first time. So really it was just the first probably 6 months to a year was honing my study habits, making sure I was able to digest the information well, my test taking habits. I was really trying to make sure I could be as successful in medicine because that was going to be my primary earning potential moving forward. And then my wife and I got married after first year of medical school. We had our first kid my third year of medical school, so things happened fast. I just did the best I could at that time to try to minimize the amount of loans we had to take out. And then that's pretty much all you can do. Try to budget best you can and control your expenses best you can without being unreasonable to minimize the loan burden. And then really my sort of financial plan to handle my loans kind of came to fruition when I was in residency. But what I would say for medical school for people is really what you can control is your budget. Do the best you can not to overspend. A lot of people take out Fed loans to go to Europe and vacation because everybody feels burnt out and feels like they need to try to enjoy life. I think there's a time and a place kind of to enjoy it a little bit, but I think when you're using compounded debt over time to go on a vacation as a young person, that's not a good financial decision. So I would try to avoid that and then try to do the best you can to enjoy medical school. I'll say retrospectively, it was a stressful time, but honestly, I felt like residency was more stressful, and then you feel like attending hood is a little more stressful. I think when you're in medical school or residency, you kind of turn your nose up at attendings who say that, but it is a different kind of stress, and you retrospectively remember those times positively. So if you can kind of make sure you remember the sky's blue and you can enjoy your experiences and have good friendships and good opportunities to enjoy yourself, I think that's where you kind of start to develop your work-life balance, because things just get easier and easier to sacrifice yourself and your mental health in order to pursue this goal that you've set. And that is not just sacrificing yourself and your mental health, but also your family, your wife, your kids. It's easy to just kind of let that overworking mentality sort of creep in. So I think medical school is a great opportunity to really set those boundaries and try to make sure you have that moving forward.
Yeah, most definitely. Set those boundaries, get a budget going. Remember that it's just going to get harder moving forward. That's something I've heard from several mentors. Like every challenge in medicine is just preparing you for the next more difficult challenge. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right from what I've heard. When did you and the wife meet? You were married in med school, had a kid your third year?
Yeah, man. So kind of a funny story. I mentioned my dad was a dentist. So I actually have known my wife my whole life. Her dad and my dad were best friends in dental school. So our families were friends. We were not very close, but just kind of families kept in touch. After I graduated from undergrad, she was at Auburn and we started dating her senior year. And then that just kind of snowballed into my first year of medical school. She actually moved to Augusta, which is where I went to school at the Medical College of Georgia. And, we had been dating for almost a year at the time. And that move came with an understanding that, our relationship was probably going to lead to something pretty serious. So, and it subsequently did. We got married after my first year, and it was sort of the rest is history. She's been a rock star. I'm thankful for her, her emotional support and her willingness to kind of be the sugar mama in med school and residency. She worked hard as a special ed math teacher, got her master's, and, became more educated and supported us, and pretty much single mom through residency. So she deserves to share in the end result for sure.
Absolutely. Shout out to Mrs. Davis.
Oh, rock star.
So rewinding to those early training years now, what kind of student were you as you were going into residency? When did you realize that you weren't just going to be following the traditional medical loan repayment track, that you wanted to do something bigger, and then which has eventually now turned into what you have today? But at what point were you kind of realizing that?
So I've always been pretty entrepreneurial. I had a business in undergraduate school, a few actually, and I always really liked the idea of trying to manage your time. Your time is your most valuable resource, that sort of thing. And then as I transitioned into medical school, I kind of put that on hold. In medical school, I was like, all right, well, I'm pursuing a competitive specialty. I have to obviously be top of my class best I can for academics. I got to score well on the boards and go rotate well on my away rotations to put my best foot forward to match in orthopedics. And once I matched, sort of the slate's wiped clean again. You're kind of starting over. And I had to make sure that I was able to now absorb all this information to be the best orthopedist I could. But probably the second year of residency is when my wife and I were considering having our second kid, and we were trying to decide what we wanted to do with regards to my occupation. I always wanted to go into private practice, I thought, so that I could have sort of that entrepreneurship associated with the practice of medicine to sort of supplement my net worth growth as I practice medicine. I really liked that concept. But we sort of made up our mind that we wanted to move to small town Georgia. She's from small town Georgia, and that did not give me an opportunity to pursue private practice. There were no private practices here, and it's like a lot of small rural areas. It's a single hospital that sort of dominates the medical market. it provides great care to the area and has a really good brand and takes care of physicians relatively well, I would say, for a hospital system. But I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that private practice model. And that was the time where I was like, you know what, how am I going to, crawl out from under this debt scenario? I'm going to be 32 when I get out. I'll have 200 in the hole, ish, at a rate that's not fantastic because I was still doing Fed loans and considering public service loan forgiveness and that sort of thing. And at the time, I was running the numbers on what it would take for me to save traditionally, just in a 401k, for example, for me to be able to be in a position where we could live on, say, $200,000 a year in retirement at 65. And that number was quite a bit higher yearly than I had originally anticipated. So then I started trying to figure out ways in which higher income earners build their net worth. And number one was become, financially knowledgeable with regards to budgeting and controlling your finances. And I thought that was probably number one. So Anna and I spent a large amount of time creating budgets, formulating our debt repayment plan. And I made sure that I'd focused on, and I think this is critical for residents, focused on disability insurance, getting good specialty specific disability insurance so that I was protected if in fact sometime in residency before my salary had increased, something happened to me that prevented me from being able to become an orthopedic surgeon. So that was, a part of the equation. And then I found real estate, came upon it. It's a very large way in the U.S. for people to grow their net worth. I really am a big fan of the book A Millionaire Next Door. I think people should read that if you hadn't had the opportunity. It talks about what your typical millionaire is, and it's typically a small business owner. And for me, I was not going to be able to be a small business owner in my practice. I knew that. So I felt like I would be able to be a small business owner sort of in some capacity if my wife and I paired together and invested in real estate. And that would also allow me to decrease my tax burden significantly. And that's obviously our biggest expense as we transition out into practice is, that 35+% tax hit that you're going to take, which is not easy to palate. So that was really what kind of started it all. And then as I started investigating and reading, it just became sort of more fun. It became kind of a passion that gave me something to learn about outside of bones. And it just sort of grew from there.
So tell us about when you bought your first property as a resident, when most people were just trying to survive. Residency is notoriously difficult, especially in orthopedic surgery.
Yeah, it was, and our program was tough too. I wouldn't say malignant at all. I mean, we had a great camaraderie, but it was small. We had 3 residents a year and, big 1,100 bed hospital with peds and adult level 1 trauma centers with 9 helicopters flying in. So a lot of people can relate to that experience, but very, very busy, very good training. So I didn't have a ton of time, but what I just tried to do, and I think what people feel like they don't have confidence in is they don't have enough time to dedicate their bandwidth to anything else. And so what I would do is I would throw an earbud in when I was on call, and I'd be walking around the hospital listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast or listening to Audible books on tape, and I would dictate notes, and then I would review those when I had time at lunch or whatever, just because it became not only a knowledge thing for me that I knew I probably needed to gain over the next 3 to 4 years, but it also became something that I enjoyed doing. And so that kind of came to fruition as a 3rd-year resident because a lot of things started happening for me. We decided we wanted to move to the town we were moving to. I subsequently signed my contract with the hospital there, which came with a little stipend in residency. So my cash flow position in residency was better, looked better on paper for a lender. And then my future salary obviously looked quite a bit better than a resident looks on paper. And so my job at that time was then to try to find financing. That's the biggest sort of gateway limit to getting people in the game in the beginning is finding financing. And I had learned throughout the resources that I'd become educated on that community banks can be a great target in the beginning because they can hold the notes on their books. And that allows them to manipulate the terms a little bit so they can drive down payment requirements down. Possibly they can manipulate the rates a little bit. They can mess with the term a little bit. They can amortize the property over a different amount of time if need be. And I called 75 community banks before somebody gave me the time of day. And somebody came to the table, a small Southern community bank, and approved me for $650,000 of money down financing to invest in real estate. Now, that wasn't all at one time. Our first deal was a duplex that I had networked with a commercial lender in my region, which was my goal at the time was to try to buy within 3 hours of where we were going to live, just in case I needed to go check on it. And the listing was what's called a pocket listing, which meant, it came to him as a broker. And before he decided to list it on what's called the multiple listing service online to everyone and their brother to see. He called me directly, and it fit my buy box, and we made an offer and ended up buying our first property at that time, which was a duplex in a college town that was already rented and performing, which was an awesome way for us to get started.
Nice. So you were able to leverage your future earning potential,
Right.
combining that with persistency, calling 75 different
Right.
community banks, ended up getting a pretty amazing loan there,
Yeah.
650,000, no money
Yeah. The
down for
first
real
the
estate.
first note was for 210. And then we allowed that to season for about 3 months. They saw that the plan. So basically, what I would recommend for people to do, this, people are anxious about just calling a bank and saying, "Hey, can you lend me money?" That's not the way to do it. The way you do it is you call and say, I said, "Hey, my name's Franky Davis. I'm an orthopedic surgery resident who is going to be practicing within 3 hours of your market at this institution with this base salary amount. I'm interested in buying real estate in your area that is a single family home or small multifamily home built within the last 10 to 15 years, pitched roofs, brick or vinyl siding." So I had some details. I wanted them to be cash flowing at a 1% rule, which is a real estate metric that I'm sure a lot of people have heard. And that gave me a little bit of credibility in the conversation. And then once they saw that the deal that we bought on the front end, we bought it below market rents, raised rents to market, stabilized the property over 3 to 4 months, then it gave them confidence that they could potentially replicate that. And then our follow-up deal was a 5 single family home package, which actually was probably a better performing deal for us. And then we bought another duplex within probably 6 months. So we went from 0 to 2 duplexes and 5 single family houses pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And when you're calling those community banks to make those deals, you mentioned in your real estate course to read the book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Love it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
gave it a read. Fantastic book.
Yeah,
Changed
it's
the
a
game.
fantastic book, man. And, negotiating with lenders is one thing, but as you network and as you get further along in this game, you'll have the opportunity to interact with sellers or potential sellers directly. And that's when Chris Voss's techniques are critical. And we have a deal coming down the line right now. It's an 8-unit apartment complex in our town. I negotiated with the seller 18 months ago and we're not able to come to the table. And a lot of the communication that we had was implementing strategies that Chris talks about, but also staying amicable and not souring the relationship. We left on reasonable terms, even though we weren't able to get the deal done. And then I was reapproached 18 months later and able to get the property under contract for a much better price and are easily able to pencil it now. And it's going to be an awesome deal. I'll have that coming out on our social media platform soon. But Never Split the Difference is an awesome read, and it really will arm you with the confidence to make these phone calls to lenders and to brokers who are used to it. Man, doctors are not used to that sort of space. I think it's critical when you're even considering your contractual negotiation to have those techniques. I used that when I was negotiating my orthopedic contract, and it was very helpful. So I definitely recommend it.
Boom. Yeah, you can use it in more ways than just
Man,
negotiating.
for sure.
So let's talk about something you've mentioned in some of your content. We could say many physicians, well, all physicians really spend years and years of studying and hardcore training to get to where they are today. Do you think that is more or less difficult than learning how to get involved in real estate investing?
More difficult. I think it's more difficult for sure. The topic matter of real estate is really not that complicated. It's simple math. It's learning how to avoid analysis paralysis. Is networking. It's communication. It does involve multiple facets, and physicians traditionally may not be super successful in all facets because it does require kind of some business world prowess or experience. But what I would say is that it's much more difficult to be able to be a successful physician or surgical subspecialist, specialist specifically, just because the track is difficult educationally and it's really burdensome. And I would say residency by far and away was more stressful and difficult, and me having to learn how to handle that, which made me a better surgeon. I'm thankful for the experience, but real estate is difficult. I think the difficulty is eliminating your emotion from the experience, which a lot of physicians actually typically are pretty good at. Unfortunately, physicians have a track record of being terrible investors. So I think I went into this whole thing knowing that, and knowing that really I don't need real estate to be a grand slam. I just need it not to be a massive negative, because if we hit singles to right field for 15 years, then I'm going to have a great portfolio and my net worth position is going to be better than it would have been. So I think going about it like that, being as risk averse as you can, is probably the best sort of way to step into the space.
Okay. And as you were developing mastery in orthopedic surgery through your residency training, and you were learning about real estate investing, was there any correspondence in your mentality between the two? Did one help you out with the other or vice versa?
I think there are some similar kind of mindset things, not necessarily overlapping content or overlapping skill sets even. There are some like attention to detail and OCD, and unwillingness to give up. I think that's probably the biggest thing is it's easy to kind of get your confidence dinged in real estate because you don't know, you're learning and you're doing the best you can to apply this educational information that you've absorbed on your own if you decide to go about it that way. And then you're trying to deploy it in a manner that, can go well or can go poorly. So I think it's easy to lose confidence and kind of want to quit. And I think what you need to do is do the best you can to try to take some of that resilience that you've had throughout the medical tract and apply it to another genre of activity that you're going to move forward with, because inaction, in my opinion, is probably the biggest enemy that you'll have, is this analysis paralysis gorilla that everybody is battling. I've talked to physicians who are 15, 20 years in their practice, and they're like, I've been wanting to buy real estate for years. I just haven't been able to decide what I want to do or how I want to go about it. So now I got this money and I haven't been using it. And that's the worst thing you can do. I mean, you need to be letting time work for you and your money work for you best you can. And real estate may not be the asset class that's best for you. It may just be traditional investing. But if it is, then don't let that little bit of a difficulty associated with the learning curve be the reason why you don't take action. That's what I would say.
Yeah, great advice. So, Dr. Davis, how old were you when you made your first deal? You were in your second year of residency, right?
Yeah, second year of residency. So third year of residency. Second year is when we started learning. Third year of residency is when we bought. So I guess I would have been 30 maybe.
Okay.
20, 29, 30, something like that.
So we'll say about 30 at the time. And then how old are you now, sir?
36, just turned 36. Downhill to 40. Here we go.
So 36 now. So from 30 to 36, where does your portfolio stand today?
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit, man. I'll run through it and we can, tease this out if it gets too long-winded. But basically, we've probably grown our portfolio from that initial duplex to around 6.5 to 7 million under management, which is about a 40 to 45% equity position. We own quite a few commercial properties, a 10-unit commercial strip, a mixed unit downtown commercial property in a neighboring market, which is 2 commercial spaces, 5 loft apartments. We have 2 duplexes in that market still. And then we have a 91-unit self-storage facility. In probably the last 2 years, we've purchased 3 additional commercial properties in my hometown, which I'm really proud of because we're trying to add value to our hometown as well. And then we also had the opportunity to utilize some of the value add, what's called forced depreciation. When you improve the performance of an investment property, then its appraisal value actually rises. And then that creates what's called paper equity that you can then tap into. And we've utilized that for growth. And we've utilized that to also buy a short-term rental in a close by vacation destination lake, which is a lake house. There are huge benefits for physicians interested in short-term rental, which we can dig into if you want to with the short-term rental tax loophole. We also bought a 152-acre farm, which is 7 minutes from my house, so I can be deer hunting while I'm on call. It's amazing. And we were able to depreciate quite a bit of that relatively with what's called a conservation easement, because I'm not ever going to develop the land. So that was a big tax play too. So one of the things that's been fun for us is kind of doing these things that were our dreams. We always wanted to have a vacation home at some point. I thought it would be 15 years into practice. I always wanted to have a little farm that I could hunt and fish on and take my kids out and teach them how to experience the outdoors and wildlife. And we were able to do that quicker than we expected in this because we're utilizing these things that affect my tax position. So it makes it worthwhile financially for us to do so sooner rather than later.
That's incredible. And really, Dr. Davis, the reason I asked you that was because I wanted to establish that you are a true real estate beast before I ask you this next question.
I appreciate that. But what I want to say is the story that I give and stories that you hear on the internet, this influencer mentality. And I worry about that a little bit with my platform because it is part of it. It's a part of the growth and generating excitement and the momentum and things, but you don't have to be like this quickly accelerating your experience. You can just step in and buy a single family home. Or in residency, you can make the decision to buy a home and house hack it and rent 2 of the rooms to your co-residents, and you're really improving your net worth position and your financial trajectory versus renting the whole time. I think that's not always the best decision, but a small play is still a good play. So I don't want people to get discouraged because I'm sitting here saying, look what we did and, beating on my chest. That's not the goal, but it is what we've been able to do it. So it's possible. And somewhere in between, hopefully more than I've able to achieve, somewhere in between doing nothing and where I am should should be something that is a valuable pursuit for everyone in this tract.
Oh, yeah. It's motivating to say the least. Can we talk about some of your biggest lessons or mistakes that you made early on in that journey?
Yeah, I have a few that will kind of seem like not really losses or not really lessons, because in the beginning, I felt like we did really well. Our first probably 5 deals, we were conservative. I negotiated hard. We protected against downside risk. We had a capital pool saved for emergency rainy day funds. So we did a lot to protect that initial downside risk, because I didn't want to make an error that would prevent me from ever doing another deal. That was my biggest worry in the beginning. If I tanked on a deal, then we may never do it again. And I felt like that would have been the biggest negative that I could have undergone. So in the beginning, I passed on a few deals that would have made us a lot of money. One of which was a 12-unit apartment complex in my market here. And it was actually the same seller who sold me the self-storage facility, which we contacted via direct mail, handwritten letter. And I backed out of the apartment complex deal because it had a single tenant. It was a rehab hospital that was the single tenant. And it was a little bit deferred on the maintenance, but I had it under contract for under $400,000. And then this past year, it went to auction and sold for $680,000 at auction. And so that just goes to tell you, like, there was quite a bit of chicken on the bone. I probably could have tolerated it, but 12 months after I walked away from the deal, the single tenant withdrew their lease. So then they were 100% vacant for a good period of time. So I think it actually ended up being probably the smarter decision for where I was. If it was now, I would buy it 100%. And so I've kind of kicked myself about that. Another deal more recently is that same 10-unit apartment complex that I talked about. I let my property manager, who I had a great relationship with at the time, kind of influence me. A commercial inspection, formal inspection, is kind of a tenuous topic because it's very expensive and they're going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and tear it apart. And that isn't always what you need when you're trying to negotiate. So I elected to forego a formal inspection and utilize subcontractors just that I had relationships with to come in and look around and tell me kind of what they thought. And I subsequently got bit pretty hard. I think it was a combination of me doing that and bad luck. We had a hurricane come and had quite a bit of flooding and water damage and things that could have been caught. I don't know for sure. But that was, a $75,000 hit at the end of last year in October. And we had the money saved and we bid it off, but it still left a bad taste in my mouth. And I think that's probably what I would consider my most recent sort of error. But it is what it is. I mean, you got to pay to play.
Yeah. Yeah. It can't be perfect. What would you have done in hindsight to approach that deal differently, that last
I think
one?
at the time, with the knowledge that I had, I don't know that I would necessarily do anything different. I wish I would have gotten an inspection just simply because of how things went. But at the time, I don't know that I could have known that for sure. So I think definitely in the beginning, when you're first navigating it, definitely get an inspection until you understand the process, that you understand what the big capital expenditures could be that could sort of get you upside down. Make sure you're getting an inspection. And what I have done in the past is I've spoken to the inspectors and I've been like, hey, this is a 10-unit commercial strip. Like, I don't need to know every drywall ding. I don't need to know every light switch that's cracked. I just need you to tell me, foundationally, is it good? Do we have water damage? Do we have mold, termites? Do we have large, capital expenditure items that are deferred to the point at which that's either A, negotiating point, or B, a point at which I need to walk away from the deal? And that helped a lot. And that's back to the networking thing and generating good relationships. My inspector is fantastic. I overpaid her on our first couple of deals just because I was like, listen, you're a rock star. I want to make sure that you're prioritizing me in the future. And let's generate this relationship because I'm going to try to send you some business. And she's grown a ton since then, and it's been a good mutual relationship. But I think, I don't know if I would have done anything different, but I ended up taking a bath at the end of last year, and it is what it is. I'm still sour about it.
It is what it is. That's
Yeah.
right. So, Dr. Davis, what are some of the mental frameworks or some of the habits that have led to your success over the years, not only in real estate, but in medicine and family life or life in general?
First of all, I'll say I'm work on that all the time because I definitely don't think I'm an expert. This job brings stress that's impossible not to bring home, and I do the best I can to try not to bring it home and leave and compartmentalize. We learn how to compartmentalize. Residency taught me that quite a bit. A big part of that for me is my physical health. My mental health is directly related to my physical health. I exercise quite a bit, and time can be a difficult factor when it comes to exercise. So I've been, one of the benefits of being a physician is you have a little bit more disposable income. So I built out a home gym in my garage, and we have a Peloton, and I get up in the morning at 5:15 in the morning, and I knock it out before my family's awake, so I don't feel guilty. I can't come home from work when I hadn't seen my kids and say, all right, peace out, I'm going to the gym, I'll catch you guys in an hour and a half. Can't do it. So I got to work out in the morning. So that's been one part that has been a huge consistent asset for me. Even in residency, I tried to implement it. And what I would say is, it's okay if you set out to work out 5 days a week and you work out 2 days a week. That's okay. And I do that pretty often, 2 to 3, and I'll get my kids out there and make them exercise with me so they can see that this should be a part of our life. I think that's critical. The other thing is, have a little bit of patience with yourself. I try to get really organized so that I can set these goals long-term and short-term. So I'll do, 5-year goals, 1-year goal, monthly goals, weekly goals, this week's goals. What am I going to check off every day? And then I try to do that. I try to break it down kind of like you did when you stepped into medical school and you're drinking from a fire hydrant. How do you digest it all? You break it down and do the best you can. And I don't achieve it all the time. And I, every once in a while, will get frustrated with myself that I haven't checked one of the things that I thought I should. After I get off this podcast, I got a list of things I want to check off because my family's at baseball tournament out of town. So I'm like, all right, we got to check it off. But that's probably the main thing is be patient with yourself. If you're rolling the ball in the right direction in a year, you're going to be better off than you were, even if you didn't get there as quickly as you wanted. That's probably one of my biggest flaws is I tend to sort of teeter over into the workaholic kind of thing because of my patience. I'm not very patient. I want it to be, if I think of something, I'm like wanting to call a developer and buy 15 acres and build a 200-unit apartment complex. I'm like ready to go, but that's not always realistic, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you're just ready to conquer.
It's a fun game once you get a little momentum and you understand that it's doable and the mountain's climbable. It's fun to get into space for sure.
Oh, I can imagine. I want to ask you about that goal strategy you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Can you just quickly break that down for us, what that looks like? Because I've actually started implementing that into my own life when I heard you talk about it. Start from the year and then all the way down to the day. How does that work for you?
Yeah, I think it's variable. For me, initially it started with a net worth goal. It was a net worth goal and a property door number goal that we set. And we set that for, originally it was 5 years out of practice. And then it was 2 years out of practice. Then it was yearly. And we just kind of broke it down. And originally it was a 5-year net worth. And now, that goal is changing. But I think that can really help you sort of make sure that you're making some progress, because a lot of where people start spinning their wheels is if you set this goal in your head, you don't write it down, you don't tell anyone, you don't hold yourself accountable, and then you get 6 months down the road and you haven't done anything, and you're like, well, all right, well, what's the point? Kind of deflates you and makes it harder. The other thing, and I think some people are conflicted about this, is I'm pretty vocal about what I have going on. I think there are pros and cons of that. It can sometimes be a little oversharing maybe, and not everybody needs to know every single thing about you. But it also, in my opinion, has let my friends and family know where I'm at and what I got going on. And they'll come up to me and ask me, hey, how's that 8-unit apartment complex you talked about 3 weeks ago? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, daggum, I got to call and make sure that I'm, satisfactorily doing my due diligence. And that's just a silly, example from recently. But I feel like, especially with your spouse, make sure you're sitting down and having these monthly or quarterly meetings and you're saying, hey, we're dedicating this much money to retirement. We're dedicating this much money to our kids' college funds. My daughter's wedding, I save every month for my daughter's wedding. We're investing in real estate every month. We've added this much value to our portfolio. We could potentially tap into said value. It's been interesting. Anna is an absolute rock star. She compliments me very well. We're very different, and I'm thankful for that. She's much more kind of risk averse and hesitant about real estate. She wasn't a huge fan in the beginning and had to really be converted. And I think the fact that she had to be converted made me learn how to pitch the deal better, because I had convinced myself that the deals made sense already, but I had to pitch her, and having to pitch her made me feel a little more secure, but also made me feel more protective of our downside risk tolerance. And so that was a big thing. But having communication with your spouse so that those goals can be shared, and then have fun goals, recreational goals. I play guitar and I like to hunt and fish, and I play golf. And so, I want to be competitive in all those things. And so it's fun to kind of check those things off the list too.
Competitive in all realms. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, man, it's fun.
So I'm curious, actually, I want to pick your brain on this as well. Navigating the challenges of family life in medical school. What were some of the challenges that you faced with your spouse as a medical student, as a resident? And then when you brought the kids into the world, what was it like navigating those family challenges and how did you overcome those challenges?
For sure. We're still working on it. I mean, I think it's a moving target. And what I'll say is that marriage is hard in general. It's a commitment to the commitment. I love being married. I think it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Having a good partner is something that can really make you successful both personally and professionally and financially. It's kind of a cheat code if you have a spouse who's in has the same goals as you do and has the same long-term game plan. And not only that, there are specific strategies that benefit you if you're married, like real estate professional status. Anna declares real estate professional status, which just sort of a little snippet. I mean, she dedicates 750 hours a year. You don't have to have your real estate license, and it'll allow me to take passive loss off of my orthopedic salary based on the way I'm compensated, which is a huge, cheat code. It's a big benefit. What I would say is that I did the best I could when I was present to be present. It's really hard to do that, but one of my strategies is simple, but I would pull in the driveway and I would sit in my truck and cut it off and take a deep breath and sit there for 30 seconds and then walk inside. And that was a really helpful way for me to kind of, leave the emotional turmoil that was associated with having come off a 38-hour call shift, seeing 30 consults and handling floor work and all this stuff and getting, pimped in the OR, and you're burnout and you get home and you got to be a dad and a husband. And so I think that helped me. I still do that when I get home, which I think is a good small strategy. And then just communication, best you can, trying to be understanding. I'm not great at it, man. I'm still working on it for sure. And I think everybody should try to have that goal to be the best version of themselves for their spouse specifically, but also for their kids.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that because you're definitely an inspiration to a lot of the young guys and young gals even that are listening. And it's good to hear that it can all be managed with intentionality and
For sure.
discipline.
And I think, a lot of the modern day, especially stuff online, man, is like the not valuing that, not valuing the traditional family unit. It's not cool to value the traditional family unit. But what I'll say is, I got no complaints, man, at all. My wife is freaking awesome. She's smoking hot and I love it. It's great. It makes my life so much better that I get to come home to her and enjoy having my best friend to be around when I'm not at work. So hopefully other people can find that, because that's the only reason I've been able to do any of this real estate stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about right there. Have you ever thought about walking away from surgery to pursue real estate full time?
Thought about, yes. The thought, I go down the rabbit hole every once in a while and I'm like, how would that look? How would it look for our family? And we've had some recent conversations about it, which has been hilarious because my 5-year-old daughter is a miniature version of my wife, and she's a wild woman, but she was involved in that conversation. I think I'll always practice orthopedics in some capacity. I love it. I love interacting with patients. I think right now I'm young and I have the hustle in medicine. So I see a bunch of patients in the clinic and I do a lot of surgery now and try to be efficient and make sure that we're treating people well and taking care of the community, but also being efficient and making money, that kind of thing. And I think what I'll probably do is transition to a different phase of my orthopedic career at some point. That's probably, I don't know, my mid 40s, late 40s, and travel a little more and spend a little more time, doing what I want to do, maybe taking a little less call. We'll see how it goes. I don't have a hard stop point by any means. I probably will never really stop. The funny thing was the conversation we had, we were sitting around the table and it was me and Trey and Ellie and Anna. And I asked Ellie specifically if she thought I worked too much. And she said no. And I said, okay, well, do I work too little? And she was like, no, I think you work just right. And I was like, well, you don't want me to be home a little bit more? And she goes, no. So I was like, all right, well, maybe we're balancing okay, because she doesn't feel like her dad's not around. And I get one benefit of my job scenario here in Moultrie, which I think everybody should try to tailor their job to allow some of this stuff, is I get to take my kids to school twice a week and I see them. I'm at their practices and at their games and stuff. So that's the biggest priority. Before any of this other stuff's happening, you got to make sure you're checking those boxes, because it ain't worth it, in my opinion, when they're gone. And they're going to be gone soon. Trey's almost 11, so it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, you've clearly got a great balance between real estate, between work, between family. You make time to go out. I see on your Instagram, you're on the lake, you're working out, you're hitting the acreage, doing a little hunting with the kids and everything. So I'm certain that leads to a great sense of fulfillment in your life. And a lot of people talk about burnout in medicine. And I think that conversation about burnout being hammered in so hard can even just lead to someone being like, yeah, like a self-fulfilling prophecy, like,
For
oh,
sure.
I'm going to be burnt out. And then you end up burnt out.
Yeah,
So
I agree 100%. I do think burnout's real. I do think that the new state of medicine is tough, more debt, coming out with lower salaries for the work that's being performed, and higher cost of living, and especially in metro areas, the salary numbers are being driven down. So there's a lot of strategies. There's a strategy called geographic arbitrage, which is actually a financial strategy, not necessarily in medicine, where you make money in one market and move to another market so you can live at a lower cost of living. Now, those were in the example that I learned about that. It was like living out of the country and earning money in the US with the dollar. But you can even do that on a smaller scale by, rural medicine or on the outskirts of a large metropolitan area where you maybe can have some of that lifestyle benefit of being in that metro area, but make money in a market where it doesn't cost so much to live. Because usually those gross salary dollar amounts are at or better than what you would make in the metro area, and the cost of living is better. So I do think burnout's real, and you need to focus on how to try to minimize your burnout. But I also think, I'm a doctor, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, but it's not my only identity. And I think it's, I have other interests and I have other things I want to do and relationships I want to make sure that I'm cultivating. And it's allowed me to be a better doctor for sure. It allows me to bring more patients into the clinic visits. It allows me to care more about what people have to say and what's going on in their life. And I think it's easy to become callous, particularly in surgery, when you're dealing with pain seeking and you're dealing with difficult outcomes. I mean, I have difficult outcomes like everybody else. Nobody's got 100% perfect track record in medicine. I'm 4 years in, and it's real. It's a hard job. So, but I think that has helped me a lot with the burnout factor. I do navigate it still a little bit, and, I'll continue to try to dedicate bandwidth and make sure that Anna has that in the back of her head too, because she has a good sort of litmus test for knowing when I'm getting smoked, and that helps.
Yeah. Yeah, because when I hear a first-year medical student talking about feeling burnt out, I can't help but think like, man, dude,
Hold your breath.
yeah,
Yeah.
you gotta find a way to mitigate that.
Yeah,
Because
but that's
like you said,
practice. It's an opportunity. I mean, we all felt burnout, man. You
yeah,
felt burnout studying for the MCAT. Then you feel burnout in medicine when you get in there and you have more, you have more to learn in the first month than you learned all of undergrad.
yeah,
It's like, all right, you're knocked on your heels and you're trying to get it together. And I just think what I'll say is like the days are going to continue. The day's going to end. That's what I used to tell younger residents. It's like they would be smoked. And I'm like, listen, man, the day's going to end. The day's going to end. The week's going to end. And you're going to look back and you're going to be fine. And at the end of the day, you will be better for it. And so just grit your teeth, take a breath, go get a cup of coffee, take a 15-minute break and watch, ridiculousness or whatever it is that's going to help turn your brain off. And then get back at it and refocus and find the reason why you're passionate about what you're passionate about. And then that'll help you over the long term. And then that strategy for me never stopped. When I was in residency, if I was getting burnt up in the ER and I had 10 consults waiting and 2 sedations waiting in the peds ER, I would go up to the physician's lounge and make a coffee and take 45 seconds to take a breath and then go back and handle it. And that's just what you have to do throughout your life as a physician. It's what you have to do in your marriage. It's what you have to do with your kids when they're teenagers and they're acting the fool. It just is what it is. And so I think if you can learn that sooner rather than later and not let those little mental hurdles get you so emotionally revved up that you have a hard time handling it, then I think you'll be better for it.
that's fantastic. Yeah, taking every moment and turning it into a challenge that can be used to sharpen your mind, make yourself stronger every day.
And having stuff outside of medicine is, in my opinion, one of the biggest ways to make those things not so critical. You're not dying on every cliff if you got something going on other than what's going on at that particular moment. And for me, that was anything from playing ping pong with my med school buddies to going out to dinner to $1 pizza night with Anna once a week because we were broke. It's the little things, and just try to find ways to make the sky blue again. And that'll allow you to be a better physician in the future.
Love it. So let's transition now into your current platform, Real Estate Investor MD. With Real Estate Investor MD, you've helped a lot of physicians break free from this financial fear, and you've offered them the resources to start learning. So tell us about what started that, where it's at now, and where you want it to go.
Yeah, man, it's been really, really a fun process. It's kind of surreal a little bit because about probably 12 months ago, a little bit longer maybe, it was just kind of a brainchild. I was talking to Anna and I was like, you know what? I feel like I have physicians reaching out to me all the time that I know personally who are asking me questions. They're asking for resources. They're asking how to become educated. How do I have time to become educated? That sort of same question line that I'm getting asked now all the time. And I was like, you know what? I feel like if I could just take the time to sit down and get my thoughts out in a video format, then I could help a lot of people. I feel like it would provide a service to people that makes that learning curve shorter, and it expedites their confidence and minimizes the analysis paralysis. and it'll set physicians up for the opportunity to really improve their financial scenario and minimize their burnout. I was like, that, I feel like I've gotten into a little bit of a lucky scenario. Sometimes I got to kind of pinch myself because of where we are and how things are going. And I don't feel horribly, miserably burnt out in my practice, because it sounds like everyone is when you listen. And that's where it started. So then I spent, the next couple of weeks writing out an outline. It was about, I can't even remember now, very, very large amount of kind of word vomit dump. And then we broke it down, and I subsequently recorded the videos. It's about 7.5 hours of material that summarizes about 35 books and 200 episodes of podcasts. And it takes you from the beginning to the end. A lot of what we've talked about today, financial sort of literacy in the beginning, positioning yourself in the beginning to be prepared when the time's right to move into the space. Then it's team building, brokers and realtors, accountants, financial advisors, if you elect to go that route. I don't do that personally, but if you do, definitely getting an attorney to help you with all of your entity formation and your downside risk protection, because this is a litigious profession that we're in medicine, and you don't want that litigiousness to affect your investments, but you also don't want somebody falling on your property and suing you as a physician and garnishing your wages for forever. So that's a big part of it. Networking with bankers and lending institutions, and then networking with other people in the real estate space. So it walks through all that. It walks through vetting deals, lead funnels, breaking the deals down and underwriting them, buying them, negotiating them, getting them financed, repositioning them, tapping into that value add position so that you can pull money out and grow your portfolio. 1031 exchanges, which means you sell a property and then roll that profit into another asset tax-free, which is a valuable resource. We've done that about 5 times. And then it goes to management, how you manage efficiently with things like virtual assistants. I delegate a lot of my time and bandwidth to a virtual assistant who's located in the US, and she's fantastic. She helps me a ton with management and also with my social media platform. And then it goes into real estate growth and tax mitigation. It goes through the whole process. So everything I've done is in the course, and it's broken down in a bite-sized way to digest it. But that's not for everyone. I think one thing that is a little bit played out is the course model, the online course model. Everybody's trying to get rich quick. And I know that sort of comes with a little bit of a stigma. I'm not getting rich quick on the course. It's been a lot more work and a lot less reward than I expected initially, but it is growing, and we now have 20,000 just over 20,000 followers on Instagram. And the most fun part for me is the networking, is people reaching out saying, hey, I'm a second year med student. I'm feeling a little burnout, but I'm excited about the opportunity to get into real estate. What do you think I should do to get involved? And so typically what I'll do is I present them with everything we have available. The course, I do some mentorship. We have some mini courses that are valued a little better. We just dropped the price. Originally I had the price at about $1,400, and we dropped it down to $97 so that med students and undergraduate students would have access. But then I'll also provide them with all kind of book resources. Like I've said, the Bigger Pockets podcast, there's plenty of opportunity to do it on your own. And I support that 1,000% if people want to do it. It just depends on kind of what your best learning kind of model is and what fits your needs the best. In my mind, all I really care about is that people take steps and do it. And whether that's through my platform or my course, or whether they send me one text message and I can encourage them to do it, that's kind of what it's turned into, and I'm excited about what the future holds. Another sort of exciting thing that the platform's led to is for physicians that subsequently decide, I have this money available, I have some expendable income, but I don't have the bandwidth to do it on my own. We actually have put together a private equity fund for physicians to funnel their money into larger development opportunities, and we've invested into a subset of Ivy League med school clusters that have recent NIH grant funding. So that's a really exciting project that we deployed capital last year. It is for accredited investors, unfortunately, so usually not available to residents and newly physicians, but a really cool sort of pivot away to allow some of this networking to come in and help and provide value from that standpoint. I'm about to partner with another company that provides short-term rental education, because the short-term rental loophole for W-2 employees, basically they have a full-service accounting brokerage firm that automates short-term rental. So they help you find deals, vet deals, underwrite deals, buy the deal, and then manage it and materially participate at 100 hours a year so that you can then declare the STR loophole. They handle the accounting side, which is an awesome asset for physicians who are not really wanting to buy long-term rentals or grow their portfolio that way, or maybe don't qualify for real estate professional status. So I just threw out some pretty specific terms, but basically just how I didn't really expect how this online platform would grow over time. It's kind of a malleable moving target, and I'm just kind of watching, and we're going to see where it goes, but I've really enjoyed it. And I hope anybody who watches this podcast will just reach out to me via the platform and say what's up and ask me how things are going, and maybe I can help them.
Yeah, no, it's a great platform. I can attest to it. I bought the course. I've been going through it. I'm probably about a quarter of the way through. It's just
Awesome.
fantastic because I definitely want to learn more about real estate. I've been working through it. It's basically all of the important stuff that you need. Like you mentioned, it's from like 250 podcasts and 30 books. It's like
Yeah.
right there. It's a great course. So I'll have the info to that course in the show notes below. And it's Real Estate Investor MD on Instagram. If anybody's
Yeah.
interested in looking at that, I would recommend. Dr. Davis, I'm an incoming medical student. I'm starting up in July. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be broke. I have all this debt. I don't know what to do. What's a piece of practical advice you're going to give me if I want to get rich?
Take a breath. Try to implement all the things that we talked about with regards to teaching you time management. You're going to be hit with struggle, and you're going to be shocked by the content amount and the rate at which you have to absorb it. And so I think if you can, first of all, take time questioning your study habits and make sure that you're trying to be malleable too. I came into it with a certain set of study habits that worked for me in undergraduate school that did not work as well. I came in and I was making B's on my med school test, and I was like, that ain't going to cut it. And I had to change it up. And it was just because the strategies that I had in undergraduate school was for that volume of information, and I couldn't extrapolate that to medical school. So I had to tweak my study habits a little bit, and then also had to tweak my test taking habits a little bit. So I think my recommendation to you would be sort of multifaceted. It would be take care of your mental health, stay physically active, network with your friends, and enjoy your life while you're in med school. It's an awesome time. I had fantastic friends that I communicate with now, and I think it is a really fun time retrospectively, but then focus on breaking the process down so that you can be as successful as possible, especially if you want to pursue a competitive specialty, because unfortunately it is getting more and more and more competitive.
Advice. And as we wrap up, sir, the mission of the Physician's Mind is to give successful people like yourself a platform to share their experiences and advice for curious minds who want to optimize their journeys of lifelong learning and self-improvement, and that's in medicine and beyond. Do you have any final pieces of advice in line with this mission that you would like to share?
I don't think so, man. We dug into it pretty well. I'm proud to be a part of the podcast. It's a great idea. Great idea. I hope, I can continue to help cultivate the growth and give you as much reach as possible, because the cool part about it is if you keep this going throughout your whole medicine career, like, you're on the front end and people are going to watch you go through it. They're going to watch you hopefully, honestly navigate some struggle. And I'd be more than happy to be a part of any of that. I don't have all the answers, but I have some answers. And who knows, I'll have to tell you about some struggle that I'm dealing with too, so that maybe you can avoid it in the future. But I think I'm a big fan of physicians relying on physicians for experience. And a lot of times it seems like the traditional sort of mindset in medicine was we eat our young, and it was, I went through it this way and this is how it has to be. And so you're going to go through it that way and it's malignant and you're going to suffer. And that's just not how it needs to be. I mean, I definitely think, residency needs to be hard. I think I'm a little conflicted about making it easy and everybody wanting to worry about their feelings and things. And like, I'm all about mental health, but it needs to be hard. It needs to be enough patient interaction and volume and stress mitigation so that when you get out, you can handle the life. But I also think outside of that clinical environment, and even inside the clinical environment, there needs to be this understanding that, like, we're all on the same team, and like, we're trying to practice this career and provide service to the community that has value, but also allows us to be mentally stable enough to do it over the long term, so we're not all, miserable. And I think what you're doing is definitely going to do that over time, and potentially could add more value than you even realize moving forward.
Yes, support and the compliments mean a lot coming from you, sir. You're a huge inspiration to me. I'm honored to have had you on the show, and thank you so much for sharing some of your insights.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate it. I'll come on again for sure. We'll do it in another couple of years.
Looking forward to it. Let's do it. All
man.
right. Thank you again, Dr. Davis.
Yes, sir.